AITA for losing it when my in-laws secretly moved in during my work trip? I did not answer. I simply opened my banking app in front of her. To understand what happened in that apartment, you first have to understand what that apartment was and what it meant to me. Brian and I have been married for 6 years. We met in the line for the photocopier at the university library. One of those beginnings so mundane that when you tell it, people always expect there to be something more. A romantic detail that justifies how something so ordinary gave birth to something that lasts. There was nothing more. We simply started talking while waiting, and we kept talking for 4 years before getting married, and that was enough. Brian is a civil engineer. He works in a mid-sized consulting firm. He travels little, comes home at a reasonable hour, and cooks badly, but with enthusiasm on weekends. He has 2 siblings, Eric, who is 4 years older and lives in Indianapolis, and a sister who has lived in Denver for 10 years and comes for Christmas. His mother, Patricia, also lives in Indianapolis and comes to Chicago 4 or 5 times a year. Visits that were always reasonably civilized as long as they did not exceed 3 days. We bought the apartment 3 years ago with both our savings and a bank loan. A 3rd floor in a modern building in the Lakeview neighborhood of Chicago. 2 bedrooms, a large living room with natural light all morning. A kitchen that, when I saw it for the first time, seemed so well designed that I signed the contract almost without reading the rest of the clauses. It took me months to have it exactly how I wanted it, the paintings in their place, the bookshelf filled with books in an order that makes sense to me, the bathroom plant I had always wanted and that Brian systematically forgot to water. When we arrived at the title company to close, Brian and I had talked about putting the apartment in both names. It was the most logical thing, he said. It was the most normal thing, he said. We were a couple, a team. It made no sense to make distinctions. The day before closing, my mother called me. My mother is 72 years old and worked her whole life as an administrator in a law firm where she learned, in her own words, that the distance between love and a signed paper could be the distance between having everything and having nothing. Nicole, she told me, the apartment in your name. Mom, we are a couple. I know, my daughter, and I hope you stay that way until you die. But papers are papers and life is life, and the two do not always go in the same direction. The apartment in your name. Brian is going to get mad. Let him get mad. Who is putting the money for the down payment? Both of us. Who is putting more? A pause. I am, I admitted. The apartment in your name. I signed a loan. The next day, Brian got mad. Yes, not in a dramatic way, but enough for me to feel it for a week in the tone of certain conversations. He said it was a lack of trust. I said it was a reasonable precaution. We never spoke of it again. That decision made at the title company on an October Tuesday, while it was raining outside and the closer was looking for the pen he had dropped under the table, was the piece that 3 years later changed everything. The business trip came up on a Tuesday during a team meeting where my boss presented the schedule for the Phoenix project. Final phase implementation. On-site supervision needed for a week. Who could go? I raised my hand because it was the project I knew best, and because I liked to do things right, and because at that moment, I had no reason to think that being absent from my own apartment for 7 days could lead to what it led to. The night before I left, I packed my suitcase while Brian watched the game in the living room. I left him a magnetized list on the fridge. Call plumber. Garbage, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Bathroom plant water every 3 days. Do you need anything else before I leave? I asked, poking my head into the living room. No, I am good, he said without taking his eyes off the game. Take care of yourself. Take care of the apartment, I said. Of course, he replied. I took an Uber to the airport at 6 in the morning the next day as the car crossed the still dark and empty city. I looked out the window at the buildings with unlit windows and thought of nothing in particular. Only about the work awaiting me and the fact that I had forgotten my computer adapter and would have to buy one at the airport. I did not think about what might happen in my apartment while I was not there. I never thought about it. The flight arrived at O'Hare International Airport at 4:15 in the afternoon on Friday. I had flown back rather than driving because it was more comfortable for carry-on luggage, and because Friday afternoon return flights have that specific atmosphere of people coming home, different from the atmosphere of people leaving, more relaxed and more tired at the same time. I took the L train from O'Hare. In the car, there was a mother with a baby asleep in a stroller, a group of students with huge backpacks, an elderly man reading a newspaper folded in four. I looked at my phone. I had a message from Brian from 2 in the afternoon that said, "What time are you arriving?" To which I had replied with the flight time. There had been no other message since. I got off at my stop. I walked the 4 minutes to the building with the suitcase rolling behind me on the sidewalk. That sidewalk I have known by heart for 3 years, with the crack in front of the grocery store and the loose paving stone before the main door that always makes me trip if I do not remember it. In the lobby, the mailbox was full. I emptied it mechanically, a bill, a pizza flyer, a letter from the condo association. I tucked it under my arm. I went up to the 3rd floor in the elevator. The hallway was as always, the same doors, the same fluorescent light at the end that has been flickering for months without the condo association doing anything about it. I reached my door and there, before putting the key in, I stopped for a second. There was something, I could not say exactly what, a very light sound filtering through the door, the television perhaps, but with a different density, and the very faint smell coming through the bottom crack. Garlic and herbs, and something else that took me a moment to identify as the specific smell of the beef stew Patricia makes. That beef stew that takes 4 hours and permeates everything, and that I had eaten enough times at her place in Indianapolis to recognize. But it was not possible. Patricia was in Indianapolis. I put the key in, turned it, opened. The smell hit me full force. Not a trace, not a suggestion. The full, unapologetic smell of a kitchen that had been running for hours, and with it the sound of the television on, animated voices from an afternoon show, and underneath it all, the recognizable patter of a child running in the hallway of my house. I stood on the threshold. I counted the shoes by the door, for pairs. I pushed the suitcase inside, closed the door, took 2 steps, and Patricia came out of the kitchen. "Patricia," I said in a voice that sounded calmer than I felt. "What are you doing here?" She looked at me with that expression she gets when she does not understand why someone is asking a question to which the answer is obvious. "Well, to help Nicole. Brian told me you were arriving today, and I thought what better welcome than finding dinner ready after a week of traveling." She gestured toward the kitchen with the spoon she held in her hand. "My beef stew. Brian has loved it since he was little." "When did you arrive?" "Tuesday." I stared at her. "Tuesday? That was 4 days ago. And who else is here?" "Eric and Stephanie with the kids." She turned her head toward the hallway. "The little ones are in the living room. Eric has an interview next week here in Chicago, and we thought that." I did not listen to the rest. My eyes had rested in the hallway on the painting I had near the mirror, the one I had bought at a gallery in Wicker Park, and that had cost me enough for Brian to roll his eyes when I told him the price. It had been moved to the right by about 20 centimeters. In the spot where it hung was now a framed photograph. It was a studio family photo, the kind taken for special occasions. Patricia sitting in the center with a blue blouse I had never seen her wear, and around her her 3 children, Brian and Eric and the sister from Denver, and Eric's children in the foreground in their Sunday best. A perfectly normal photo in the context of Patricia's house in Indianapolis. In my hallway, in the spot where I had placed a painting I had chosen myself with my own money for that specific wall, it became something completely different. I continued down the hallway. The entryway coat rack, where there were normally 2 coats, now had 5 or 6 hanging with that dense accumulation of clothing when there are too many for the available space. A gray wool coat that belonged to Patricia. I recognized it from previous Christmases. A man's jacket that was not Brian's, a navy blue child's jacket, a colorful scarf I had never seen. I walked into the living room. On the sofa where I sit to read in the afternoons, the spot near the window with the afternoon light, there were 2 compact travel pillows, the kind people use when they sleep at someone else's house. On the coffee table where there was normally only the remote control, and sometimes a book of mine left open face down, there were glasses, a plate with half-finished cookies, a children's coloring book open to a page of uncolored dinosaurs, and 3 uncapped markers scattered on the wood. On the floor in front of the television, 2 dark-haired children in pajamas at 5 in the afternoon were watching a tablet, each with their own headphones. The oldest, who must have been about 8 years old, looked up when I came in. "Hi," he said with the perfect nonchalance of someone who sees nothing abnormal in this situation. "Hi," I answered mechanically. The younger one did not look up. I went to the kitchen. Patricia was by the stove stirring the beef stew with a wooden spoon that I had never seen and that she must have brought. On the counter, There were 2 large reusable grocery bags still with things inside. In the sink, there was a stack of plates from a previous meal, washed and stacked to drain in my dish rack near my sink. "Where are you sleeping?" I asked because I needed to know, even though I already had a pretty clear idea. Patricia turned around. Something in my face must have told her the question was not mere curiosity, because for the first time since she came out of the kitchen, her expression changed slightly. "Eric and Stephanie in the guest bedroom," she said. "The kids in the living room in the sleeping bags they brought. And me in your bedroom, as Brian insisted I be comfortable." I stood completely still. "In our bedroom." Well, with Brian away this week, it made no sense to leave it empty. Brian is away. He is staying at a friend's place, so there would be more room here. It was his idea. He said we would be more comfortable this way. I leaned against the counter, hands flat on the cold marble. I breathed slowly. Brian was at a friend's house, while his mother slept in my bed and his nephews played in my living room, and his sister-in-law put her clothes away in my guest closet. At a friend's. "Tell Brian to call me," I said. "I am going to unpack my suitcase." The bedroom smelled like Patricia. Not in a horrible way, not in a way you could point a finger at and call an invasion. It smelled of the hand cream she uses, the one with lavender that I had smelled hundreds of times at her place in Indianapolis, and something harder to name, the specific smell of another person's clothes when they stay for several days in a space that is not theirs. The bed was made with a quilt that was not mine, a burgundy and green plaid quilt, thick and old, the kind that lasts for decades. My duvet, the gray down one I had spent weeks choosing, was folded on the armchair in the corner, placed carefully, as if someone had wanted to treat it well while moving it from its place. On Brian's nightstand, there was a glass of water, a box of blood pressure pills that belonged to Patricia, and a blue-covered novel with a cardboard bookmark halfway through. On my nightstand, there was a rosary of brown beads with a small golden cross at the end, placed carefully, coiled around itself as if it were completely normal for it to be there. I looked at it for a time I could not calculate. Then I took out my phone and called Brian. 4 rings. Voicemail. I called again. Voicemail again. I sent him a message. "I just arrived. Call me as soon as you can. We need to talk." I went to the closet. I opened the door with something resembling fear, and I felt a relief I should not have needed to feel when I saw that my clothes were still there. My dresses, my sweaters on the shelves, my shoes on the floor in the order I had left them. I sat on the edge of the bed. On my side, the left, with Patricia's rosary 20 centimeters from my hand, and I wondered how to explain to someone who has not lived it the exact sensation of finding yourself in your own bedroom, feeling like you had to ask permission to be there. Dinner was at 8 in the evening. Patricia announced it from the kitchen with that quiet authority of someone who has been organizing family meals for 40 years and does not conceive that the schedule could be any different. Eric appeared in the living room freshly showered, with a clean shirt and that way of occupying space that some men have, spreading out sideways as if sofas were smaller when they sit down. Stephanie arrived behind him with her hair still damp, having somehow managed to shower the kids as well, who were now wearing clean pajamas and had their hair combed. "Nicole." Eric gave me a hug with the naturalness of someone who sees you regularly. "How are you?" "Good. The trip was good," I said. "These business trips are tiring." "No, but that is what family is for, so you can come home and not have to worry about anything." Stephanie gave me a hug as well and told me I looked good. That work suited me, and in her eyes there was something oscillating between sincere sympathy and the embarrassment of someone who knows the situation is not exactly right, but is not sure what to do with that knowledge. The dining room table was set with the Sunday tablecloths, the white linen ones I keep in the bottom drawer of the sideboard and take out for special occasions. Patricia had found the tureen I keep in the high kitchen cabinet, the white porcelain one with the blue rim that belonged to my grandmother, and had placed it in the center filled with steaming beef stew. I sat in my spot, the one that is always mine at that table. For a ridiculous second, I wondered if anyone had sat there during the week and if it mattered to me. It mattered to me. It should not matter to me so much, but it mattered to me. "To the table," Patricia said, with that energy of women who have made feeding others the center of their way of loving. The conversation during dinner was of that specific type that exists in family gatherings where there is attention no one names. Everyone talks about things that do not matter, so they do not have to talk about the ones that do. Eric's work mentioned in passing as a transition, the kids' activities at school in Indianapolis. A cousin who had gotten married in September in a wedding that, according to Patricia, had been very nice, even if the catering left something to be desired. I ate and answered when I was asked questions directly, and I observed. The way Patricia served the beef stew as if she had owned that kitchen for years. The way Eric pointed to the water pitcher to have it passed to him. The way the kids asked for more bread without getting up from their chairs because they knew exactly where the bread basket was in my sideboard. In 4 days, they had learned where I kept the bread basket. It was at the end of dinner, when Patricia was serving coffee in the everyday mugs she had found on the second shelf, when it happened. Eric was talking about something I was not completely following, something about the real estate market in Indianapolis and rental prices. And at one point in that conversation, he said with the naturalness of someone sharing an inconsequential philosophical observation, "That is why family property is so important. An apartment of one's own is a shared asset. That is why we work, so the family has a place to be when they need it." I looked at Patricia. Patricia was looking at her coffee. I looked at Eric, who returned my gaze with the equanimity of someone who has said something he considers a universal truth about which there is no possible discussion. I looked at Stephanie, who was looking at her cup with an intensity that suggested she found the inside of the cup extraordinarily interesting. And then Patricia, without looking up from her coffee, said, "Of course, this house is for the family. This house is for the family." 5 words spoken with the same naturalness as saying it is going to rain tomorrow or that the bread is good. Without emphasis, without any apparent intention to provoke, with the serene conviction of someone stating a fact she considers so established that it does not even require defense. My apartment, the one whose deed bears my name, the one I had bought with my savings and my signature on a bank loan contract tied to my salary, the one I had spent weeks transforming into exactly what I wanted it to be. For the family. I said nothing at all. I drank the coffee, but somewhere inside me, something that had been wondering since the moment I opened the door what to do with all this suddenly found an answer that was completely clear. I excused myself at 10 in the evening, saying I was tired from the trip, which was true, even though it was not the only reason. I went to the bedroom, closed the door, and locked it, something I never do. And the sound of the lock sliding gave me a small, completely symbolic satisfaction. I sat on the edge of the bed on my side and looked at Patricia's rosary on my nightstand for a long time. Then I called Brian. This time, he answered on the second ring. "Nicole. Hi. You made it back safely, right?" His voice sounded relaxed. It was the voice of someone who is comfortably at a friend's house, who has had a good dinner and watched television, and who hopes the call will be brief and friendly. "Brian," I said, "there are 4 people living in my apartment." A short pause. "Yes. Sorry I did not tell you earlier. It is just that." I interrupted him. "Before you give me the explanation, I want you to understand what I just said. I came home after 7 days away and found your mother sleeping in my bed, your brother and his wife in my guest room, your nephews in my living room, and your mother wearing my apron in my kitchen telling me dinner was ready." Silence. "Nicole, they are not just anyone, they are family. When did you decide they could come?" "Last week. My mom called me saying Eric was very stressed with work and they needed to get out of Indianapolis for a few days. And I thought that with the apartment empty the week you were gone, you thought you could put your family in my house without asking me." "Nicole." "Without asking me, Brian. Not a message, not a call, not a listen. Are you okay with this?" "Nothing. It is just that I thought you would say yes anyway." I remained silent for a moment. "And what if I had said no?" "No," he replied. "Where are you?" I asked. "At Scott's." "Your friend Scott who has a 2-room apartment in Wicker Park?" "Yes." "So you are at Scott's while your mother sleeps in my bed and your nephews sleep in my living room." "I thought that way there would be more room for everyone and they would be more comfortable." "Brian," I paused. "How long do they plan to stay?" "Eric has the interview on Wednesday. If it goes well." "If it goes well, what?" "Well, if he gets the job, they will stay here while they find something. Chicago offers more opportunities and rents are impossible." And silence. "Your plan was for your brother and his family to stay in my apartment while they look for a place in Chicago. It would not be for long." "Brian, listen to me. Tomorrow, I need you to come over." I paused. "And I need you to come over after thinking about what you have done. Not with a list of arguments explaining why what you did was right. Understood. A long pause. Okay, he said, in the voice of someone who knows the conversation did not go as he had hoped. What time? Whatever time you want. But tomorrow. I hung up. I lay on the bed with my mother-in-law's burgundy plaid quilt on top, because it was the only cover available, staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, and I stayed like that for an amount of time I could not calculate. I thought about many things. About Patricia's sentence, the shoes by the door, the painting moved to make room for the family photo, the rosary. About Brian at Scott's while his family occupied my space. And I also thought about something I had not thought about in 3 years, since the day I had signed it and put it away in the locked drawer of the desk. The property deed with my name, only my name. I slept badly, but I slept with something that felt like clarity. I got up before everyone else at 7:15 in the morning and went to the kitchen in silence. I made coffee the way I like it, strong, with the Italian coffee maker that Patricia had left clean in the dish rack next to hers, which was of a different brand and a different size. 2 coffee makers in my dish rack, a small domestic image of something bigger. I drank it standing by the window that overlooks the inner courtyard, looking at the first-floor neighbor's small maple tree that had the last yellow leaves of the season moving in the morning wind. At 8 in the morning the noises started. The oldest, whose name was Connor based on what I had heard the day before, got out of his sleeping bag in the living room, and his first act was to turn on the television. At the volume of someone who has not yet understood that there are people sleeping 3 meters away. I walked into the living room. "Good morning," I said. "Can you turn the volume down?" He looked at me. He was 8 years old, and that specific look children have when asked to do something they do not quite understand why they have to do. "My grandmother says I can get up whenever I want," he said. I looked at him for a second. "In this house, when someone is sleeping, we keep the volume down," I said, with the calm of someone who is not going to argue with an 8-year-old child at 8 in the morning, but who is not going to give in either. "Please." He looked at me for another moment. Then he lowered the volume. I returned to the kitchen. At 8:30 in the morning, Patricia appeared in a robe and slippers with that rhythm of a woman who has gotten up at the same time her whole life and does not need to think about it. "Good morning, Nicole. Did you sleep well?" "So. Normal, with the trip." "Do you want me to make breakfast?" "That is not necessary, Patricia." "It is no trouble. I have eggs." I said it is not necessary. She stopped and looked at me. There was something in my face that, for the first time since my arrival, made Patricia look at me with real attention. Not with the distraction of someone who is already thinking about what she has to do next, but with the attention of someone recalibrating the situation. "Nicole, are you okay?" "I am waiting for Brian," I said. "Can you tell everyone that after breakfast, I need to speak with them?" A pause. "Speak about what?" "After breakfast," I repeated. Brian arrived at 11:10 in the morning with that look of someone who has slept well at someone else's house and hopes the situation in his own house has improved overnight. "Hi," he said, giving me a kiss on the cheek that I received without rejecting it, but also without returning the same warmth as before. "Hi." We went into the bedroom. I closed the door. He stood near the closet, hands in his pockets. I sat on the edge of the bed. For a second, neither of us spoke. That second contained all the conversations we were going to have. "Brian," I started, "I need you to explain to me calmly, and without leaving anything out. What went through your mind when you decided your family could move in here?" "Nicole, I already explained it to you last night. Last night you gave me the facts. Now I want to understand the reasoning. I want to understand how you came to the conclusion that it was a decision you could make all by yourself." He became slightly agitated. "Mom called me, and she was worried about Eric." "That I understand. What happened after?" "I thought that with the apartment empty for a week, it was a shame not to take advantage of it." "Take advantage of it?" "I do not mean it like that, but take advantage of my apartment to move your family in without my permission. It is not yours, it is ours. The contract says otherwise." "Brian," I looked at him. "But let us leave that aside. What I want to understand is why you did not call me." "One call. 3 minutes. Nicole, Mom wants to bring Eric and the kids this week. Are you okay with that? That is all you had to do." He remained silent. "I thought you would say yes." Maybe I would have said yes. Maybe not. But it was my decision, not yours. We are a couple, Nicole. Decisions about my apartment are mine. I paused. And there is one more thing I need you to understand. Last night, your mother sat at my table, with my tablecloth, eating the beef stew she had cooked in my kitchen, that this house is for the family. Do you know what that means? It was just a figure of speech. It was not a figure of speech, Brian. It was a declaration of how she understands the situation. And by inviting her without asking my permission, you proved her right. Long silence. What do you want me to do? He finally said, in the voice of someone who has realized he is on complicated ground and is looking for the most practical way out. I want you to be here this afternoon when I speak to everyone. You will be here this afternoon, I repeated, and I need you to be on my side. He looked at me. I am always on your side. Then prove it this afternoon. Saturday morning passed with that specific slowness of situations where you are waiting for something that has not happened yet. I had breakfast with everyone because there was no reasonable alternative. Patricia made a large omelet that filled the kitchen with that smell of kitchens where real cooking is done. And she served it at the living room table with bread and juice and all the trappings of a Sunday family breakfast. I ate. I answered the kids' questions about whether I liked dinosaurs and what my favorite show was, and if I had ever seen the moon up close. I listened to Eric talk about Wednesday's interview with that mix of performative optimism and real anxiety that men have when they need people to believe in them. I listened to Stephanie talk about schools in Chicago with the caution of someone who has not yet decided if she wants to be in that conversation. And while I listened, I thought about many things. I thought about the locked drawer of the bedroom desk, what was inside it, the property deed I had signed alone at that title company 3 years earlier while it rained, and the closer looked for the pen under the table. I thought about the homeowner's insurance renewal I had done 3 months earlier with the agent whose name was Laura, who was efficient and meticulous, and who had explained all the policy coverages to me with a patience I had appreciated, even if I was not sure I needed to know them all. About the legal advisory service for homeowners included in the policy for free, with a helpline available Monday to Friday from 9 in the morning to 7 in the evening. I thought about the rights of a homeowner when there are people inside without their consent and without a contract. I thought about all this while I ate the omelet and answered questions about dinosaurs. And then I thought of something else. I thought of Tony the locksmith, whose number I had in my phone since I had locked myself out 2 years ago. A nice man who had arrived in 20 minutes and charged me a reasonable price, and who had, according to what was written on the card he had given me and that I had kept just in case, provided service on Saturdays until 8 in the evening. The pieces did not come together all at once. They fell into place one by one with the tranquility of someone who is not in a hurry because she knows time is on her side. At 12:15 in the afternoon, I excused myself saying I was going to rest a bit, and I went to the bedroom. I opened the locked drawer. I took out the property deed. I looked at it for a moment. My name, the apartment address, the date, the seal, everything exactly as I remembered it. I put it in my bag. Then I took my phone and looked up the number for Laura, the insurance agent. I sent her a message. Laura, this is Nicole, a homeowner's insurance client. Could we speak first thing on Monday morning? I have a question about the homeowner legal service. She replied in 8 minutes. Of course, Nicole, I will call you Monday at 9 in the morning. Perfect. Then I looked for the number for Tony the locksmith. I looked at the number for a moment, not because I doubted, but because I wanted to be sure to completely understand what I was about to do and its consequences. I understood it. I called Tony the locksmith. Hello. Hello. I need to change the lock on my apartment. Do you have availability today? Yes, ma'am. What time works for you? At 6 in the evening. At 6 in the evening, we can do it. Can you give me the address? I gave him the address. I gave him my name. I gave him the building number. Perfect, he said. At 6 in the evening, we will be there. Thank you. I hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed with the phone in my hand for a moment in that specific silence that exists after making a point of no return decision. Then I stood up. I washed my face. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, the same mirror I look at myself in every morning for the past 3 years. I returned to the living room. At 4 in the afternoon sharp, I gathered everyone in the living room. Not with drama, not with the tone of someone who is going to give a speech. I called them with the naturalness of someone saying coffee is ready, because the tone of this meeting mattered as much as the words that would follow. Can you come to the living room for a moment? I want to tell you something. They sat down. Patricia chose the corner armchair. Her spot during that week. based on what I deduced from the way she went straight to it. Eric and Stephanie on the sofa. Stephanie with the little one on her lap, because he had started to get heavy. Brian next to his brother, hands clasped between his knees, the posture of someone who is nervous and trying to control it. The kids stayed on the floor with their things. In that state of present absence kids have when they are busy and adults are talking about things they do not understand. I remained standing. I looked at each of them before speaking, not with hostility, but with the attention of someone who wants to make sure what she is going to say really lands. I want to talk to you about the apartment, I said. This apartment is registered in my name as the sole owner on the deed and in the property records. The mortgage is linked exclusively to my bank account and my credit history. There is no other name on any document related to this property. Silence. Eric opened his mouth. Nicole, the family. Let me finish, I said, with a calm that was not forced but completely real. Because when you have thought decisions through, you are calm. I am telling you this not to create a conflict, but so that we all understand the same situation. Brian told you that you could come. Brian did not have the authority to do that, because Brian is not the owner of this apartment. Brian looked down. Mom, Eric continued, looking at Patricia. You said that. What your mother said does not change what the deed says, I said. Patricia was looking at me. In her eyes, there was something I had been waiting to see since the day before. Not the tranquility of someone on her own territory, but the recognition that perhaps the territory was not hers. Nicole, Patricia began. Patricia, I know you did not come with bad intentions. I know you wanted to help Eric, and I know Brian told you that you were welcome. The problem is not your intention. The problem is that a decision was made about my house without asking me. Silence. At 6 p.m, a locksmith is coming to change the lock, I said. I will give one key to Brian and keep one for myself. The current keys will become useless. Brian jumped up. Nicole, this is out of line. This is my family. This is my apartment. We have been married for 6 years, and in 6 years, Brian, this is the first time someone moves 4 people into my house without asking my permission. I looked at him. If there had been a call, a conversation, the answer could have been completely different. But there was not one. You were traveling. I had my phone on 24 hours a day. He remained silent. Eric, I said, turning to him, I am giving you until Wednesday to find another place to stay. If you need guidance on short-term rentals in Chicago, I can help you look. Eric looked at me with that specific expression of someone completely recalibrating the situation he thought he had, and who does not like the results of the recalculation. Stephanie, this does not concern the kids. They can stay comfortably until Wednesday. Stephanie nodded. She was the only person in that room who did not seem completely surprised. At 6:02 p.m, the intercom rang. That is the locksmith, I said. Excuse me. The locksmith's name was Tony, and it took him exactly 25 minutes to change the lock. He was a man in his 40s, efficient and quiet, who did his job without looking at anyone or asking questions, which is the correct attitude when working in houses where the situation is tense. During those 25 minutes, my husband's family scattered around the apartment with that diffuse movement of people who do not know exactly what is happening, but sense that something has changed permanently. Patricia went to the kitchen. I heard pots moving, the sound of running water, her way of dealing with difficult things, by doing something with her hands. Eric disappeared into the guest bedroom with his phone. I heard him talking in a low voice, first to I do not know who, then looking for apartments, based on the fragments that reached the hallway. For how many nights? Does it have parking included? Sheets? Stephanie stayed in the living room with the kids. Connor, the oldest, looked up when I walked by. Aunt Nicole, did you guys fight? No, I said. Adults are talking about adult things. Do we have to leave? I looked at him. 8 years old. His father's dark eyes, but his mother's direct expression. This week, you guys are looking for another place, I said. But do not worry about it. That is your parents' business. He nodded. He went back to his tablet. Brian was in the hallway watching Tony work, arms crossed, with the expression of someone processing something that completely surprised him. Even if, on some level, he should have anticipated it. When Tony finished, he handed me 2 keys on a transparent plastic keychain. It is done, he said. Sign here. I signed. I paid him. I opened the door for him. I thanked him. I closed the door. I turned around. Brian was in the hallway. Patricia had come out of the kitchen. Eric was poking his head out from the bedroom hallway. Stephanie from the living room. 5 people were looking at me. The new key in my hand. I gave one of the keys to Brian. This one is yours, I said. That does not change. Then I put the other one in my bag. Patricia was the first to speak. She came toward me from the kitchen, hands clasped in front of her. That gesture of hers I always associated with difficult conversations. Nicole, I know I went too far. I looked at her. It was not my intention to make you feel like this in your own house, she continued. I came because I wanted to help Eric, and Brian told us it was welcomed, and she stopped. I did not think about how you were going to experience it. I know. Patricia, what you said last night, what you said about the house being for the family. I should not have said it like that. No, you should not have. This house is yours. For words practically the same as the day before, but completely different. The weight of those words in the right direction was different. Thank you for saying it, I said. Eric waited for Patricia to finish before approaching. He was the person I least expected a difficult conversation from, because he was the one who had shown the least awareness of the problem. This surprised me, Nicole, he said in a lower voice than his usual tone. I found an apartment for tomorrow. We are leaving tomorrow morning. I gave you until Wednesday. Yes, but it is better this way. I looked at him for a moment. Good luck with the interview on Wednesday, I said. And I truly meant it, because the situation with Eric was not personal, but circumstantial. He nodded. He went back to the guest bedroom. Stephanie walked past me on her way to get the kids ready for dinner and briefly placed a hand on my arm. Just for a second, without saying anything. That gesture was worth more than any apology she could have formulated. Brian was the last. We were left alone in the hallway when the others had retreated. The new key in his hand. The new key in my bag. Nicole, he said. We will talk about it later, I said. Not tonight. Tonight, I need this to settle. Are we okay? I looked at him for a moment. The question was legitimate and deserved an honest answer. We are in a difficult moment, I said. Which is not the same as being bad, but I need you to truly understand what happened before we can be okay. I understand. Do you really understand? Or are you saying it because you want the conversation to end? A long pause. Both, he admitted. That unexpected honesty did something inside me. That, at least, is true, I said. Eric and Stephanie left on Sunday morning at 10 in the morning. They found a short-term rental 15 minutes away by subway that had good reviews and included parking, which solved Eric's problem with the rental car. Connor, the oldest, looked for me before leaving. Aunt Nicole. Yes, Connor. Will we be able to see you again someday? I looked at him. 8 years old. The conflicts of adults were not his. Of course you will, I said. This does not concern you. He smiled. He ran off to the elevator where his father was already waiting. Patricia left on Monday after breakfast. We had spent Sunday with that fragile normality of 2 people who have had a difficult moment and are trying to figure out how to make sure it is not everything that defines their relationship. At the door, with her suitcase already on the landing, she turned around. Nicole, I hope we can be okay. We can, I said. But I need you to remember what happened this week the next time you make decisions about my house. It will not happen again. Okay. She gave me a hug, took her suitcase, and waited for the elevator without looking back. With Brian, the conversation lasted for days. I am not going to summarize it because that would be dishonest to its complexity. What I can say is that there are things he truly understood and things it will take him longer to understand, and distinguishing between the two required conversations that were not always comfortable. What I learned from all this is something I already vaguely knew, and which became very concrete this week. That ownership is not just a paper in a drawer. It is the clarity of knowing there is a space that is yours, that you built, that your choices are in every corner of that space. And that defending it when someone considers it theirs without asking you is not a lack of generosity, but the knowledge of what is rightfully yours. That calm, when it comes from a place of real information and not resignation, has an effectiveness that open conflict rarely achieves, because calm allows you to think, and thinking allows you to act with precision, and precision in certain situations is the only thing that works. That there are sentences spoken with naturalness that are the most revealing of all. The house is for the family. 5 words that assume without a doubt that another person's space belongs to everyone because everyone is family, which confuse affection with entitlement, taking for granted what was not given to them, and that sometimes the most powerful response is not a speech, but the locksmith. The following Tuesday, when the apartment became completely mine again, except for Brian, I sat in my spot on the sofa, the one near the window with the afternoon light, with a coffee and the book I had been trying to read for a week. The bathroom plant needed water. The bathroom leak was still waiting for the plumber. In the hallway, the Wicker Park painting had returned to its place, and Patricia's family photo had disappeared, taken by her without anyone asking her to, which was perhaps the most eloquent gesture of everything that had happened. Things to sort out, all mine. I opened the book to the page where I had left it. Outside in the inner courtyard, the first-floor neighbor's small maple tree moved its last yellow leaves in the November wind. I began to read. Comment: I really hope this story made you stop and think about your own life for a bit. Setting clear boundaries is one of the most important ways to show respect for yourself and the people you love. I believe protecting your personal space doesn't make you selfish, it makes you responsible. Speaking up calmly when something doesn't feel right can prevent bigger problems later. True kindness includes being kind to your own heart and needs. Taking ownership of your peace is something we all have to learn. Honest conversations, even the uncomfortable ones, often lead to real healing in relationships. Choosing calm and clarity over chaos has helped me so many times. You deserve to feel safe, valued, and respected in your own home and life. Let's keep supporting each other to build healthier and more respectful connections every day. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.